Hello, and welcome to the channel. I'm Lexicon, and today I want to return to my other hobby of whining about children's cartoons and wishing they fit my taste better. You know, quality grown-up content for adults to enjoy. You clicked on this video. You know why we're here. I wanted to do something big for October, and I've also been sitting on this idea for like months. So, let's get into why Danny Phantom was a stellar concept with inconsistent execution, and why I think it would be a fantastic animated show for an older audience given some TLC, starting with the main characters. But first, a little background. The situation around Danny Phantom is kind of comparable to that of Miraculous, though to a much lesser degree. See my video on Miraculous for my thoughts on that. But whereas Miraculous is just an absolute messy train wreck in its original state, Danny Phantom actually manages to hold itself together until the very end. It's not a super elaborate or sophisticated plotline, but it does have its fair share of callbacks and continuity shenanigans. It has several specials that progress the story in a small series of continued plots, and the villains all have very distinct personalities and designs that make you actually want to see more of them. Some are more forgettable than others due to differences in screen time, but they always make an impact no matter how big or small. They also interact with each other off camera in a way that makes Danny's rogues gallery feel a lot more real and organic, like actual characters instead of story props. In fact, the show in general does a really good job with its characterization, even if it leans a bit too hard on stereotypes sometimes. Its world is engaging and aesthetically pleasing, and the lore and setting of the show really stands out from the other cartoons. Not to mention, it's just a genuinely fun watch with plenty of humor and compelling plot lines. So, you might be wondering, what am I making this video for if I have so much good to say about it? Well, let's talk about that. Where my problem with Danny Phantom arises is in the final season of the show, as well as just some minor nitpicks. The final season really drops the ball when it comes to story nuance and character development, in my opinion anyway, and it takes the main antagonist of the show, at least the one who's supposed to be the main antagonist, and absolutely butchers his character. This all leads to a finale that's so infamous in the fandom that a whole subgenre in the fanfiction space, as well as just a common tag on AO3, includes the simple act of ignoring the finale altogether. Anyway, all of that was to say that the characters sort of fell off at the end. While none were butchered, get it? Cause Butch Hart, I'm not funny. Anyway, none of them were butchered quite so badly as Vlad, but all of them really started to take a nosedive, including our main three. That bothered me a lot, because I got really attached to these characters, their quirks, their flaws, all of it. The plot, however, had this weird pendulum thing going on, where sometimes it would be really cool and surprisingly compelling, and then go right back to that Nickelodeon brand dumbness. Or maybe I should say Butch Hartman brand, because we've all seen some really good, consistent shows come out of Nick, including but not limited to Avatar, Korra, in my opinion, and the 2012 TMNT, and you can fight me on that, actually. But yeah, Danny Phantom at once takes itself really seriously and then not seriously at all. And while that's a good thing sometimes, I think a concept of this nature in particular could benefit from a little bit of a rewrite. Of course, I'm not a show writer, nor do I understand the nuances of that job. I also don't really care to adhere to the standards of a children's TV channel, which, of course, Danny Phantom had to do. But what I do want to do is have a more fun brainstorming session on what I would do with the idea personally. Also, if you're a frequent watcher of this form of video, I will totally admit that I was heavily inspired by Calamara's series on Miraculous and some other stories, so check her out if you haven't already. because if you clicked on this, you'll probably enjoy her content very much. I'll link her channel in the description. With all that said, let's begin with Danny himself. Danny is, simply put, a regular old teenage boy put in a definitely not regular old situation. He's your typical protagonist, especially from the beginning. Not much there in terms of strong characterization or quirks until they come up later in the series for just random reasons. He likes normal boy things: video games, his friends, and junk food. He's the skinny underdog, he's bullied by the popular kids, and he has a giant crush on the popular girl at school. What makes Danny shine, I think, are his friends. He's a social outcast, but not a lone wolf. He's dealing with a lot of social problems and problems at home with his weird parents on top of all the ghost stuff, but most of the time he seems like a pretty happy kid. What I do want to expand on are the traits that make him stand out, besides just his ghost powers. I get that Danny's supposed to be the basic, relatable kid for boys to live through as a power fantasy, but honestly, once you've read as much fanfiction as I have, you start to see that he works really well as a more responsible and a haunted character. And I'm not saying that just for edgy points. This kid died. I don't really care if the original intended for it to seem that way or not, but the way a lot of the fandom interpreted it, myself included, is that Danny died, or half died, in the ghost portal machine, only to come halfway back as a ghost. I've seen a lot of fanfictions that really explore this concept, and I'm inclined to agree to a certain point. I wouldn't go quite as grisly as a lot of them, and believe me, you'd be glad. Danny Phantom fanfic is some of the most messed up you'll find. But I do think the show would be better suited to something more adult or older teen oriented. I don't want to give it to something like Netflix, but maybe, I don't know, Adult Swim or something could handle it, just so long as they keep it animated, for goodness sake. But yeah, Danny's kind of half dead, and that means he has a lot on his mind about that kind of thing. He doesn't really fit in with his friends or the other kids at his school anymore, and he's constantly worrying that his ghost hunter parents will find out about him, and he has ghosts that are being like ghost racist towards him all the time. It's rough. I do think that when he first recovers, he'd have a lot of fun with his powers, but over time he would start to realize that they're not something to be happy about. Hunting ghosts starts to become a real drain on his time and energy, and the responsibility of managing this constant spectral threat on Amity Park would start seriously messing up his psyche. To that end, I think I'd rather him be aged up at least a little, maybe to 16 or 17. 14 is great and all, but I feel like it doesn't really give me the leeway to do quite as much with the story. I guess the older you get, the less you want to write about kids doing dangerous stuff, huh? A few popular concepts I've seen thrown around really stuck with me, so I kept them and put my own spin on them for this design. I don't know that I would want Danny to keep his ice powers in particular, since they seem a little random. But I do think it would be cool and a little creepy to have him always feel really cold and maybe have an abnormally low body temp. This would make him always need to wear sweaters, since his human body is constantly freaking out and thinking he's in hypothermia mode. The shivering and struggling to survive would also mean that he'd stay hungry and need to eat a lot, a la The Flash, and probably struggle to build muscle, so he stays this gangly looking kid that no one would really ever suspect of being capable of Phantom's feats. Also, it's mentioned a few times in the show that Danny wants to be an astronaut and go to space, but never really reflected in anything other than these offhand comments. I think it could be neat to model his wardrobe, room, and whatever else he has after this desire, and maybe having him study to go to a really good school, thereby giving the CAT tests a lot more weight in the Dark Danny arc. I also think of his love of video games, once just a thing he was into because he's a regular teen guy, would become a form of stress relief for him and an outlet for his frustrations. I imagine he, Tucker, and Sam probably have a dedicated team in their favorite MMO and play on weekend nights. As for Phantom, which is what I'm calling him in true fandom form, I want to push the more ghostly aspects of his appearance. Danny Phantom is no stranger to mild and probably unintentional body horror, and though I don't want to go that far into it, it just makes sense to have his ghostly form be a little less human. I didn't go overboard, just gave him some glowing freckles, small fangs, and floaty hair that makes him look like he doesn't really obey the law of gravity. I also gave Danny that little white skunk stripe he had in Phantom Planet, because as much as I hate that finale and everyone else would rather it didn't exist, you gotta admit it's a cool idea and a little hint of Phantom in his human form. So that's my reasoning for Danny's new appearance. As for how the plot would change to accommodate it... Daniel Fenton is a pretty normal kid, all things considered. He has normal hobbies and interest in space, and makes average grades despite his efforts to work towards a new scholarship. He has two best friends, Tucker, his childhood buddy and gaming partner since kindergarten, and Sam, the vegan goth activist they met in middle school. The only thing that makes him stand out is his family's history. See, they're paranormal investigators who make their money from streaming and otherwise monetizing their ghost hunting activity online. Most people think they're just putting on an act for their online personas, but the Fenton parents genuinely believe in ghosts, and they believe they can create a portal to the afterlife so they can study these ghosts in real life instead of just in theory. While Jack and Maddie are loving parents to Danny, he's still embarrassed by them, and he and Jazz have to face a little bit of neglect as they grew up due to their parents' obsession. Again, they're not evil, and there's no bad intent, but they were really unfit to raise kids and don't always think things through. This is what pushed Jazz into psychology, so she could better understand her weird parents and take care of herself and her brother better. Danny, however, just tries to avoid them as much as possible, and thus they've grown to see him as secretive and kind of a private kid. He keeps his dreams, his passions, and all his feelings to himself. In turn, he goes relatively unnoticed by his parents and classmates alike, and really only bonds with his two best friends. This comfortable status quo all changes, however, when a TV show crew asked to film the Fentons for an episode of a lifestyle show when Danny is in 6th grade. Of course, the Fenton parents invite them in and sign all the contracts, and the kids are put through months of filming for something they really don't want to be in. All this brings a lot of extra attention to the family, and it reveals something important to Amity Park and whoever watches the show. Their family is a bunch of nutcases. This is, of course, the absolute worst thing that could possibly happen to a teenager, and it drives the other kids in his grade to start ostracizing him and sometimes even bullying him. This is when he and Tucker meet Sam, a loudmouthed radical goth who protects the boys from the social onslaught. After that, they become fast friends, and remain that way for the rest of their lives. After the TV show crew leave, Danny becomes resentful of his parents despite them being happy about the extra coverage and hopes they'll receive a government grant for their scientific exploits. They still treat him like always, but Maddie starts to notice that even though Danny was never really a personable kid, he's starting to draw away even more. Jazz tries to get them to talk on multiple occasions, but Danny just walks away, further convincing Maddie that he's just going through a teenager phase and will grow out of it. They're very hands-off with the whole thing, which just drives Jazz up a wall and makes her intent on gluing her weird family back together. One day, when he's in 10th grade and Jazz is getting ready to leave for college, Danny gets into his first fight at school. Well, that's what the school calls it anyway. A much bigger football player was insulting him about his parents. It got tense, and punches were thrown. Danny was beat to a pulp, of course, and both of them were suspended for the day with equal punishment. He doesn't tell his parents, and they don't ask why he's off school. He usually just stays home when he gets sick, and their kids are pretty good about attendance since Jazz will get on to Danny about it. However, she's not there, and his parents are out at some kind of convention, so Danny is left at his house alone. Sam and Tucker come over that afternoon to check on him, and in a fit of anger, he asks them to film him going downstairs and proving that his parents' machines are all just stupid, non-functioning hunks of garbage that are ruining his life and social standing with everyone else. Being the supportive friends they are, though very uneasy about the whole thing, they go along with it, and Danny goes downstairs to punch buttons and kick things around until he finally gets to the portal to the afterlife his parents were so excited about building. "You want to see this thing?" he asks the camera, scowling. He's put on a jumpsuit his parents made in his size, half for show and half to make sure he doesn't touch anything weird. "You want to see how this magic portal works? Well, it doesn't, and I can prove it." He walks inside the portal, and at his command, Sam presses the on button. For a second, he's just fake smiling at the camera, gesturing around himself as he's getting ready to make his point. Then there's a blinding green flash of light. His friends stumble back, calling his name in terror, and there's a horrifying scream that fills the whole house. It's haunting and horrible, like two voices screaming at the same time, begging for help that would never actually come. Sam is convinced she's killed her best friend, and Tucker is crying in a mixture of fear and shock. Then the light fades, and there's nothing but a swirling mass of ectoplasm filling the entryway to the hall. For a terrible moment, they think it's Danny, until he steps out of it, looking tired and stumbling over his own 2 feet, and he falls straight through Sam's arms to faceplant into the ectoplasm-lined floor. And that's the birth of Phantom in my head. After that, he realizes the portal can't be turned off, and real live ghosts start coming through. He sees himself as personally responsible for the sudden attacks on Amity Park after that, and though his parents are doing their best to take care of the ghost threat, Danny is the only one who can speak to them on their level, but only after incapacitating and trapping them so he can make sure they aren't causing any more havoc. And of course, after a while of this, a certain middle-aged millionaire starts to take notice, but that's plot for another time, and possibly a later video. But before things really start to kick off, Danny has to learn to cope with his new and uncontrollable ghost powers and what they mean for him as a human, as a high schooler, and as a son. He has to face his own mortality and the things that come with being a ghost, like the fact that his parents' gadgets are all starting to wake up and target him. He has to realize that his parents were right all along, and though they were never the best people, they do genuinely want a connection with him. I think taking a more serious, slightly darker approach would really benefit this show, and I, for one, would love to write it if I had the time, which I don't, but I can dream. I have no idea if this will take off, or if people will even want to see me doing stuff influenced so heavily by another YouTuber, but if you're enjoying this interpretation, please do let me know. I have a lot of ideas for Sam and a few other characters, so if you want to see more, let me know by liking, subscribing, or leaving a comment down below of who you want to see. Or just tell me what you think in general. I'd be happy to hear from you. If you want to see more art I do for myself, or art from other videos, I occasionally post to my Instagram under the same name. Drop by and see if that's something you want to follow. As always, thank you for watching, especially all the way to the end. If you had fun here today, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. A second of your time helps more than you know, and I'm grateful for everyone. With that said, I'm Lexicon, and I'll see you next time.